Hello, good morning everybody. Good afternoon. It's lovely to see you all. Welcome back to Story Time with Mrs. Bell. I hope you're all enjoying the story as much as I am. I think, honestly, it's a little bit more scary than Room 13. It's really put me off going to Whitby. Anyway, if you're sitting comfortably, I'll begin. Chapter 14. I didn't go to school next day. I was having breakfast when Dad started trembling for no reason. I put my arm around him. "What about you not going to school today?" he said. I nodded. "We'll get it done for them, eh?" he said. "You and me together." I heard him on the phone in the hall talking to school. His sister," I heard him say. Yes, there's just too much going on. Yes. I put on some old jeans. I stirred the green paint he was going to use on the dining room floor and laid old sheets on the floor. "What should I do?" I asked as he stepped up onto the stepladders. He shrugged. He looked out through the window. "How about getting some of that jungle cleared?" he said, and laughed. "Get covered up first, though, and watch out for the tigers." I wore an old pair of gloves. I used an old pair of scissors to cut the stems that wouldn't snap. I dug down with a trowel to get to the roots. Thistle thorns stuck in my skin. There was green sap all over me. I made a big pile of weeds and a heap of stones against the house wall. I found spiders dangling from my claws and my hair. Shiny black beetles scurried away from me. Centipedes squirmed out of their homes. As the morning went on, I cleared a wider and wider space. Dad came out and we drank some juice together. We sat against the wall and watched the blackbirds come out where I'd been working. They dug into the soil, collected worms and insects for their young, and flew over the gardens and rooftops back to their nests. We talked about what we wanted to have out here: a pond, a fountain, a place Mum could sunbathe, somewhere to put the baby's playpen. "We'll have to cover the pond once she's crawling, though," he said. "We don't want any dangers, do we?" We went back to work again. My arms were aching and my skin was stinging. Dust and pollen clogged my nose and throat. I crawled through the weeds, dug down into the earth, slashed and pulled at the stems. I dreamt of the baby crawling out here. She was strong and kept giggling and pointing at the birds. Then I saw how close to the garage I had crawled, and I thought of the man in there, how he just sat there, how he seemed to be just waiting to die. I stood up and went to the garage door. I stood listening. But there was nothing. Nothing but the usual scuttling and scratching. "You just can't sit there," I called. "You just can't sit there like you're waiting to die." There was no answer. I stood listening. "You can't." No answer. That afternoon we went to the hospital. As we drove out of the street, I saw Mina sitting in the tree in her garden. She had a notebook in her lap and was writing or drawing. She looked at us and waved, but she didn't smile. "Strange one that," said Dad. Yes, I murmured. In the hospital, the baby was in a glass case again. There were wires and tubes going into her. She was fast asleep. Mum said everything was fine. The doctors had told her the baby could go home in a day or two. We looked down through the glass and Mum put her arm around me. She saw the blotches on my skin and asked the nurses for some cream and gently rubbed it in for me. The baby woke up and looked straight into my eyes and screwed up her face, just like she was trying to smile. "See," said Mum, "she's going to get better for us, aren't she, my little chick?" She closed her eyes again. Mum said she would stay at the hospital tonight. Dad and I headed home. 27 and 53 again? He said as we drove off into the traffic. "Oh, yes," I replied. "Right," he said. "Just a bit more work, then you can go to the Chinese later." We drove down the street. Mina was sitting on the low wall in her garden this time, reading a book. She watched us as we drew up. As we walked towards the door, I waved at her and she smiled. "Go on, take a break," Dad said. "You can finish the garden tomorrow. Go on, go and see Mina."